The courtroom fell silent when they brought her in. Queen Camilla, dressed in a simple gray suit, walked between two officers with her head held high. No crown, no jewels. Just a woman facing charges that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Striking the king. Assault on the sovereign. The words appeared on every newspaper, every news channel, every social media post across the nation. But no one knew the real story. Not yet. In the front row of the public gallery sat a man in civilian clothes. His name was Robert Chen. For 12 years, he'd been a royal guard. For 12 years, he'd stood outside the king's private chambers. He'd seen things, heard things, things the public would never imagine. And today, he was the key witness. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The ancient ritual of British justice played out exactly as it had for centuries. But nothing about this case was ordinary. "All rise for Her Majesty's court," the bailiff announced. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Her Majesty's court, trying Her Majesty. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Helena Winters, stood first. "Your Honor, the Crown will prove beyond reasonable doubt that on the evening of March 15th, Queen Camilla struck His Majesty King Charles in his private chambers, causing visible injury and emotional distress." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge's gavel cracked down. Order. Camilla's defense attorney, a distinguished man named Sir Geoffrey Moore, rose slowly. "Your Honor, the defense will show that the events of that evening have been grossly mischaracterized. That context matters. That truth is far more complex than a simple charge suggests. Before you hear what really happened that night, if you love stories about truth, justice, and the hidden lives of the powerful, subscribe to this channel. Real drama. Real emotions. Real revelations. Now, back to the trial. The prosecution called their first witness, Dr. Patricia Ames, the royal physician. She took the stand, swore her oath, and sat rigidly. "Dr. Ames," Helena Winters began, "you examined His Majesty on the night in question?" "Yes. Please describe what you observed." Dr. Ames pulled out her notes. "His Majesty had a contusion on his left cheek, approximately 4 centimeters in diameter. Swelling was present. Minor bleeding from a split in the skin near the cheekbone, consistent with being struck by a hand or fist." The courtroom buzzed. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled frantically. "And in your professional opinion, could this injury have been self-inflicted or accidental?" "No. The angle and force required indicate it was inflicted by another person." "Thank you, Doctor." Helena sat down, satisfied. Sir Geoffrey stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Ames, you've been the royal physician for how long?" 17 years. "And in those 17 years, have you ever treated His Majesty for injuries before?" Dr. Ames hesitated. "Yes. What kind of injuries?" "Various falls, minor accidents, but nothing like this?" "No, so this was unusual. Alarming, even." "Yes. Did His Majesty tell you what happened?" Dr. Ames looked uncomfortable. "He said there had been an argument." "An argument. Did he seem afraid of the Queen?" "I cannot speculate on His Majesty's emotional state. But you were there. You saw him. Did he act like a man who'd been assaulted by his wife? Did he ask for protection? Did he want her arrested?" "No. In fact, what did he say when you suggested calling security?" Dr. Ames's voice dropped. "He said to leave it alone, that it was a private matter." Sir Geoffrey let that hang in the air. A private matter. "Thank you, Doctor." No further questions. The prosecution called their second witness, Inspector Marcus Webb from the Metropolitan Police. He'd been the one to investigate after a palace staff member reported the incident. "Inspector Webb, tell us how this investigation began." Webb, a solid man in his 50s, spoke clearly. "On March 16th, we received a report from a palace employee who claimed to have witnessed an assault the previous evening. We were obligated to investigate. And what did you find?" "We interviewed staff members, examined the king's chambers, photographed His Majesty's injuries, collected statements. Based on your investigation, did you believe a crime had occurred?" Yes, all evidence pointed to an assault. Did the Queen deny striking the king? No. When questioned, she admitted to it. Gasps filled the courtroom. Camilla sat perfectly still, her face revealing nothing. She confessed. She acknowledged, striking His Majesty. Yes, but she claimed there were extenuating circumstances. She refused to elaborate at that time. Helena Winters turned to the judge. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call its star witness. The man who was on duty outside the royal chambers that night. The guard who heard everything. Every head turned toward Robert Chen. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. Walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. And as he sat down, facing the packed courtroom, facing the Queen herself, he wondered if the truth would set anyone free, or if it would destroy them all. Robert Chen settled into the witness chair. His mouth was dry. His hands trembled slightly. He'd faced dangerous situations as a guard, threats, protesters, unstable, individuals trying to breach security, but nothing prepared him for this moment. Helena Winters approached with a predator's confidence. Mr. Chen, you were on duty outside His Majesty's private chambers on the evening of March 15th? Yes, ma'am. How long have you served as a royal guard? 12 years. In those 12 years, have you always performed your duties with integrity and discretion? I've tried to, yes. Mr. Chen, tell us what you heard that night. Robert took a breath. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Camera zoomed in. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. I took my post at 8 p.m. His Majesty and the Queen were inside their chambers. At approximately 9:30, I heard raised voices. Could you make out what they were saying? Not at first. The doors are thick. But the voices got louder, angrier. Go on, I heard the Queen shouting. She said, how could you? Then His Majesty's voice also raised, though I couldn't make out his words clearly. Helena moved closer. What happened next? Robert's eyes flicked to Camilla. She was watching him intently. Not angry. Not pleading. Just watching. I heard a loud sound. Like a slap. Then silence. Then I heard His Majesty say something that sounded like, get out. And then the Queen emerged from the chambers. She was crying. Her hands were shaking. She walked past me without looking at me. I'd never seen her like that before. Like what? Broken. Completely broken. Helena frowned slightly. That wasn't the description she wanted. But you heard her strike the king? I heard a sound consistent with that, yes. And His Majesty ordered her out? Yes, Mr. Chen. In your 12 years of service, had you ever heard them argue before? Robert hesitated. This was dangerous territory. Sometimes. Were these arguments frequent? No, but they happened. And had you ever heard physical violence before? No, never. Helena seemed satisfied. Thank you, Mr. Chen. She returned to her seat. Sir Geoffrey stood. He moved slowly, deliberately. Mr. Chen, you said the Queen emerged looking broken. Can you elaborate? She was crying. Her makeup was smeared. She looked devastated. Did she look angry? Aggressive? Like someone who'd just committed assault? No. She looked like someone in pain. Yes, Mr. Chen, you mentioned you'd heard arguments before. What were they usually about? Helena stood. Objection. Irrelevant and calls for speculation. The judge considered. I'll allow it. The witness may answer based on what he heard. Robert shifted. I never heard details, just ... tension. His Majesty seemed stressed often. The Queen seemed worried about him. Worried how? She'd ask him about his health, about his schedule, whether he was taking his medication. He'd get irritated sometimes. Did His Majesty ever seem cruel to the Queen? Objection. Helena was on her feet. Speculation and defamatory. Sustained. Rephrase, Sir Geoffrey. Mr. Chen, in your observations, did the royal couple seem happy? Robert thought carefully. They seemed ... complicated. like any long marriage. Some days good, some days tense. On this particular evening, before you heard the argument, had anything unusual happened? I don't know what happened inside the chambers, but earlier in the day, I heard palace staff talking. About what? About His Majesty having received some kind of news. Medical results, they said. Helena stood again. Objection. Hearsay. Your Honor, Sir Geoffrey said calmly, this goes to the context of what happened that evening. State of mind. The judge nodded. I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Chen. Staff seemed worried. They said His Majesty had been quiet all day, that he'd canceled meetings, that he'd asked not to be disturbed. Out. And yet the Queen was with him that evening. Yes, she always spent evenings with him, no matter what. Sir Geoffrey paused, letting that sink in. Mr. Chen, when the Queen walked past you that night, did you fear for your safety? Did she seem dangerous? No. Did she seem like someone who just violently assaulted her husband? She seemed like someone whose world had just fallen apart. Okay. The courtroom stirred. Sir Geoffrey pressed on. After the Queen left, did you check on His Majesty? Yes. I knocked and asked if he needed assistance. He told me to go away. He sounded not angry, just tired, broken like her. Both broken. Interesting. Sir Geoffrey walked back to his table. Mr. Chen, one final question. In your 12 years of service, observing this couple nearly every day, do you believe the Queen is a violent person? Helena objected, but the judge allowed it. Robert looked directly at Camilla. No, I don't. I think something terrible happened that night. But I don't think she's violent. I think she was desperate. Desperate enough to strike the king. Maybe, or desperate enough to wake him up to reality. So the courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel came down hard. Order, order. Sir Geoffrey smiled slightly. No further questions. Helena stood for redirect. Mr. Chen, regardless of the Queen's emotional state, did she or did she not strike His Majesty? Based on what I heard, yes. Striking the king is a crime, is it not? I'm not a lawyer, ma'am, but you understand that no one, regardless of their emotional state, has the right to physically assault another person? Robert met her eyes. I understand that truth is usually more complicated than it seems. Helena's jaw tightened. Answer the question, Mr. Chen. Yes, I understand that assault is a crime. Thank you. No further questions. Robert stepped down, feeling like he'd just walked through fire. He returned to his seat, wondering if he'd helped or hurt, wondering if anyone really wanted the truth. The judge called for a recess. As people filed out, Robert noticed someone watching him from the back of the courtroom. A young woman with a press badge. She smiled slightly, nodded. Something in her expression told Robert she knew more than she should, and that the real story was just beginning. During the recess, Robert stepped outside for air. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters. Some held signs supporting Camilla, "Stand by our Queen." Others demanded justice. No one above the law. The young journalist from the courtroom appeared beside him. Up close, she looked tired, determined. Mr. Chen, I'm Sophie Ashford. Independent journalist. She handed him a card. Can we talk? I just testified. I can't off the record, please. 5 minutes. Something in her urgency made him pause. What's this about? Sophie glanced around, then lowered her voice. I've been investigating this case for 3 months. There's something the prosecution isn't telling anyone. Something about why this really happened. The trial will reveal everything, will it? Sophie's eyes were intense. Mr. Chen, do you know what medical results His Majesty received that day? Robert stiffened. No, neither does anyone else. The palace sealed those records, called them matters of national security. She pulled out a folder. But I have sources. Hospital staff who talk, and what they say changes everything. I can't listen to this. His Majesty has early onset dementia, progressive, degenerative. The diagnosis came back that morning. Robert felt the ground shift beneath him. That's impossible. He's functional. He works. He, for now, but the prognosis is 5 to 10 years before a significant decline. Maybe less. Sophie's voice softened. Mr. Chen, the Queen has known for months that she'd been lied to, that His Majesty had symptoms he was hiding, that he'd been taking experimental medications without telling her. Even if that's true, it doesn't justify that night she found out he'd been planning to abdicate, to step down without telling her, to make decisions about their future, about his care, about everything, without including her at all. Robert stared at her. The pieces were starting to fit. The arguments, the worry, the desperation in Camilla's eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because the prosecution is painting her as a violent woman who lost her temper. But that's not what happened. She struck him because he'd shut her out of the most important crisis of their lives. She struck him because he was disappearing into decisions that would affect both of them, and he wouldn't let her in. That's still assault, is it? Sophie challenged. Or is it a wife fighting to save her husband from himself? Before Robert could respond, the bailiff called everyone back. Court was resuming. Inside, the judge addressed the room. The prosecution may call its next witness. Helena stood. Your Honor, the Crown calls His Majesty King Charles. The courtroom exploded. People gasped. Reporters jumped to their feet. This was unprecedented. A reigning monarch testifying in court against his wife. The judge's gavel cracked repeatedly. Order. I will have order. Slowly, silence returned. All eyes turned to the door. King Charles entered looking every one of his 75 years. Thinner than in recent photographs. Tired, he wore a simple suit. Moved slowly. 2 aides flanked him, though they weren't needed. He took the stand. Swore his oath. Sat down carefully. Camilla's face was pale. Her hands gripped the table. This was the first time they'd been in the same room since that night. Helena approached respectfully. Your Majesty, thank you for your willingness to testify. I know this is difficult. Charles nodded but said nothing. Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened on the evening of March 15th? Charles was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady but soft. My wife and I had an argument. It became heated. She struck me. Why did she strike you? We disagreed about a personal matter. What matter? I'd prefer not to say. Helena frowned. Your Majesty, with respect, this is a criminal trial. The court needs to understand context. The context is simple. We argued. She hit me. That's assault. Did you feel threatened? No. Did you fear for your safety? No. Then why are we here? Why press charges? Charles finally looked at Camilla. His expression was complicated. Pain, regret, something else Robert couldn't read, because Charles said slowly, no one should strike another person in anger. Not commoners. Not royals. Not spouses. It's wrong. The law must apply equally to everyone. Helena seemed surprised by this answer. She'd expected anger, indignation. Instead, she got principle. Your Majesty, do you love your wife? Objection. Sir Geoffrey stood. Irrelevant, Your Honor. It goes to motive and state of mind. I'll allow it. Your Majesty may answer. Charles's eyes never left Camilla. Yes, very much. Then why are you testifying against her? Because love doesn't exempt anyone from consequences. If we, in our position, are allowed to harm each other without accountability, what message does that send? It was a careful answer. Political. But something underneath felt wrong to Robert. Like Charles was reciting lines he'd been coached to say, Sir Geoffrey stood for cross-examination. His demeanor was respectful but firm. Your Majesty, you mentioned a personal matter you were arguing about. Was this matter related to your health? Charles's face tightened. I declined to answer, Your Majesty, with respect. The nature of the argument is crucial to understanding what happened. I said I decline. The judge intervened. Your Majesty, while I understand your desire for privacy, this court requires truthful and complete testimony. Charles looked at the judge. At his attorneys? At the crowded courtroom. Finally, at Camilla. We were arguing about my medical care. What about your medical care? I'd received a diagnosis. A difficult one. I was making plans. My wife disagreed with those plans. What diagnosis? I have early-stage dementia, progressive and degenerative. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. The judge's gavel pounded useless. Charles sat perfectly still. Having just revealed what the palace had fought to keep secret, Sir Geoffrey waited for silence, then continued gently. In these plans you were making? I intended to abdicate within 6 months. To step down before the symptoms became obvious. Before I became a burden. Did you discuss this with the Queen? No, why not? Because it was my decision to make? Your Majesty, with respect, you're married. Surely major life decisions should be discussed with one's spouse. Charles's voice grew sharper. She would have fought me. Tried to talk me out of it. Insisted on staying by my side as I deteriorated. I couldn't let her sacrifice her life for me, so you made a unilateral decision about both your futures. I did what I thought was right, and when she found out that night, how did she react? She was angry. Hurt. She said I was shutting her out, that I had no right to decide alone. What did you say? Charles's voice dropped. I told her it was my illness, my crown, my choice, that she should be grateful I was sparing her the burden of watching me fade, and that's when she struck you. Yes, Sir Geoffrey paused, letting the courtroom absorb this. Your Majesty, did you understand why she hit you? She was angry, or was she terrified? Desperate? Fighting to keep her husband from pushing her away during the hardest moment of both your lives? Charles said nothing. Your Majesty, you said earlier that no one should strike another in anger. But was it anger that motivated the Queen? Or was it love? Helena objected, but the judge overruled. Charles looked at his hands. When he spoke, his voice cracked slightly. I don't know anymore. The courtroom remained silent after Charles's testimony. He stepped down slowly, aided by court officers. He didn't look at Camilla as he passed. Didn't look at anyone. The judge called for another recess. 15 minutes to let everyone process what they'd just heard. Robert stood outside again, his mind reeling. The king had dementia, was planning to abdicate, had shut his wife out completely. Sophie found him again. Now you understand. He was trying to protect her. By destroying her? By making decisions that affected both of them without her input? Sophie shook her head. That's not protection. That's control disguised as love. What happens now? Now the defense presents their case. And I think Sir Geoffrey is about to tear this prosecution apart. Court resumed. Sir Geoffrey stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Queen Camilla to the stand. Every camera turned. Every eye focused. Camilla rose with dignity, walked to the witness stand, and swore her oath. She sat, folded her hands, and waited. Sir Geoffrey approached gently. Your Majesty, thank you for your willingness to testify. I know this is incredibly difficult. It is. But necessary. Let's start with the basics. You admit striking His Majesty on the evening of March 15th? Yes, I did. No hesitation. No excuses. Just truth. Can you tell us what led to that moment? Camilla took a breath. My husband and I have been married for nearly 20 years. In that time, I've supported him through tremendous challenges. The death of his mother. The weight of the crown. Public scrutiny. Health issues. I've been there for all of it. Go on. 6 months ago, he started acting differently. Forgetting things. Getting confused about schedules. I noticed. I asked him about it. He dismissed my concerns. What did you do? I spoke to his physicians. Privately, they told me he'd been experiencing symptoms, but had refused thorough testing. When I confronted him, he got angry. Said I was overreacting. That he was fine. Camilla's voice remained steady, but emotion flickered beneath. I let it go. I trusted he knew his own mind, but the symptoms continued, worsened. Finally, I insisted he get properly tested. And what happened? He agreed. went for extensive neurological testing, but he insisted on going alone. On getting the results alone, he shut me out of something that affected both of us. Sir Geoffrey moved closer. On March 15th, did you learn the results? Yes, by accident. I overheard him on the phone with his private secretary. They were discussing his abdication timeline, treatment options, how to manage the transition, all without consulting me. How did that make you feel? Devastated, furious, betrayed. Camilla's voice grew stronger. I've spent 20 years standing beside this man, supporting him, loving him. And when the hardest challenge arrived, he decided I wasn't worthy of inclusion, that my opinion, my feelings, my life didn't matter. What did you do? I confronted him that evening, asked him point blank about the diagnosis, about his plans. And he confirmed everything. Said he had early-stage dementia, that he was abdicating in 6 months, that it was already decided. Did he explain why he'd excluded you? Camilla's eyes filled with tears. He said he was protecting me, that watching him deteriorate would destroy me, that I deserved better than to be a caretaker for a failing king. How did you respond? I told him he didn't get to make that decision alone. That marriage meant facing challenges together, that I hadn't signed up for only the good times. And then Camilla wiped her eyes. He said I should be grateful, that most wives would jump at the chance to be free of a sick husband, that I was being selfish by wanting to stay. The courtroom stirred. Helena looked uncomfortable. This wasn't the narrative she'd expected. How did those words make you feel? Like he didn't know me at all. Like 20 years meant nothing. Like I was just convenient when he was healthy but disposable now that he wasn't? Is that when you struck him? No, not yet. Camilla's voice shook. He turned away from me, dismissed me, said the conversation was over, that I should leave and let him handle it. And then I grabbed his arm, made him look at me, told him I loved him, that I wasn't going anywhere, that we'd face this together. What did he say? Camilla's tears flowed freely now. He said, you don't have a choice. I've already decided, like I was a child, like my feelings were irrelevant, like our marriage vows meant nothing. And that's when it happened? Yes. I slapped him. Not hard, not to hurt him, but to wake him up, to make him see me, to stop him from throwing away everything we had because of his pride. Sir Geoffrey let the silence hang. Then, quietly, do you regret it? Every single day. Not because I was wrong to be angry, but because violence, even in desperation, is never the answer. If you could go back, what would you do differently? I'd find another way to reach him. Camilla's voice broke. I'd make him understand that facing dementia together was better than facing abdication alone.
Oh.
Your Majesty, one final question. Do you love your husband? With everything I am? And would you stand by him through his illness if given the chance? Without hesitation? Thank you. No further questions. Helena stood for cross-examination. She looked uncertain, like the ground had shifted beneath her. Your Majesty, you admit you struck the king? Yes, and you understand that assault is illegal. I do, yet you did it anyway. I did, in a moment of desperation. It was wrong. But the circumstances matter. The law doesn't recognize desperate circumstances as justification for violence. Perhaps it should. Helena's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting that if someone makes you angry enough, violence is acceptable? No. I'm suggesting that love, when cornered, sometimes reacts imperfectly. I'm not proud of what I did, but I understand why I did it. Understanding doesn't equal innocence. I'm not claiming innocence. I'm claiming humanity. Helena seemed to realize she was losing ground. Your Majesty, His Majesty testified that he was trying to protect you. Don't you think his intentions matter? Intentions without partnership are just control. He made decisions about our future without me. That's not protection. That's abandonment. So you struck him to punish him? I struck him to wake him up. Helena tried another angle. Your Majesty, do you believe you're above the law? No, that's why I'm here. then you accept that you should face consequences. Camilla looked directly at her. I accept that what I did was wrong. But I also believe that reducing that moment to simple assault misses the entire truth of what happened between a husband and wife facing the end of everything they knew. Lena had no response. She returned to her seat. The judge looked at both attorneys. Any redirect? Both declined. The witness is dismissed. Camilla stepped down. As she passed Charles's empty seat, she paused, just for a moment, then continued. The judge addressed the court. We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Court is adjourned. Outside, the crowds had grown. The media frenzy was overwhelming. Robert pushed through, trying to make sense of everything. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number? Meet me. St. James Park. 1 hour. You need to hear the rest. Sophie Roberts stared at the message. What more could there possibly be? But something told him Sophie was right. The real story was still unfolding. St. James Park was quiet in the late afternoon. Tourists fed ducks. Children played. Life continued as if the monarchy wasn't tearing itself. Apart in a courtroom across the city, Robert found Sophie sitting on a bench near the bridge. She had a folder on her lap and a look that said she'd been carrying secrets too long. You came, she said. You said there's more to the story. Sophie handed him the folder. This is everything I couldn't publish. Everything the palace threatened to sue me over. Everything that explains why this trial is a sham. Robert opened it. Medical records. Email printouts. Witness statements. How did you get this? Sources. People who care more about truth than protecting institutions. She pointed to a highlighted section. Read that. It was an email from the king's private secretary to several palace officials. Dated 2 months before the incident. His Majesty has expressed concern that the Queen's emotional state is becoming problematic. He wishes to explore options for managing her influence during the transition period. Suggestions include extended foreign tours, reduced public duties, and gradual distancing from decision-making processes. Robert looked up. They were planning to sideline her. Not just sideline, erase. Look at the next page. Another document. A draft statement prepared for potential release. His Majesty and Her Majesty have agreed to a period of separation, as His Majesty focuses on his health and the transition of royal duties. They were going to force her out, Robert said slowly. Make it look voluntary. The king wasn't protecting her from his illness, Sophie said. He was protecting his legacy from her involvement. The palace advisors convinced him that having a wife publicly supporting him through dementia would weaken the monarchy, make him look dependent, vulnerable. That's insane. It's the institution. Image over humanity. Always. Sophie pulled out another document. But here's what really matters. 3 days before the incident, the Queen discovered all of this. She found these drafts on his desk, realized the man she loved was being manipulated into abandoning her. So that night, she'd had enough. She confronted him not just about his diagnosis or his abdication. She confronted him about letting advisors turn him against his own wife, about choosing institutional preservation over their marriage. Robert sat back, processing. Why didn't she say this in court? Because she's protecting him. Even now. If this came out, it would destroy what's left of Charles's reputation. Make him look weak, controlled, manipulated. She'd rather be convicted than let the world see him that way.
Yes.
That's love. Or stupidity. I haven't decided which. Sophie took the folder back. But here's the thing, Robert. You're the only witness who can change the narrative without exposing these documents. You were there. You heard them. If you testify again tomorrow, you can tell the court what you really heard that night. I already testified. You told them what they wanted to hear, what you thought was safe. But you know there's more, don't you? Things you didn't mention because they seemed too personal. Too intimate. Robert thought back to that night, to the words he'd heard through the door, words he'd deliberately left out of his testimony. I heard her say, "They're turning you against me," he admitted, and him saying, They're trying to protect both of us. And her crying, saying, "I don't need protection from loving you there." That's what the court needs to hear. But I can't be recalled as a witness. The prosecution and defense both finished with me. Sophie smiled slightly. Sir Geoffrey is smarter than that. Watch tomorrow. He's going to make a motion, and he's going to need you to back it up. How do you know? Because I gave him copies of everything in this folder this morning. Anonymously, of course. Robert stared at her. You're risking your career. Maybe your freedom. Why? Because someone has to tell the truth. And because I watched my grandmother go through dementia while my grandfather pretended everything was fine. Pushed everyone away. Tried to handle it alone. It destroyed them both. Sophie's eyes were fierce. I won't let that happen to them. Not if I can help it. That evening, Robert couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Charles and Camilla, about love twisted by duty, about institutions that valued appearance over humanity, about his own role in all of it. Standing guard outside their chambers for 12 years, hearing arguments, tears, moments of tenderness, and telling himself it wasn't his place to care. The next morning, the courtroom was packed even tighter than before. Word had spread that closing arguments would be dramatic. Helena Winters went first. She was polished, precise, unemotional. Your Honor, the facts are simple. The Queen struck the King. She admits it. The law is clear. Assault is assault, regardless of circumstance, regardless of emotion, regardless of relationship. We cannot have different standards for royals than for commoners. Justice must be blind. She sat down, short, direct. Legally sound, Sir Geoffrey stood. He didn't go to the podium. Instead, he walked to the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, my colleague is correct that justice must be blind. But blind doesn't mean ignorant. Blind doesn't mean devoid of context. Blind doesn't mean we abandon our humanity in service of rigid rules. He turned to face the packed gallery. This case isn't about assault. It's about a marriage in crisis. It's about a man facing the end of his ability to be who he's always been, and a woman fighting to stand beside him anyway. It's about institutions that value image over love, and advisors who prioritize legacy over humanity. Helena stood. Objection. Counsel is making speeches rather than legal arguments. Your Honor, Sir Geoffrey said calmly, I'm about to make a motion that is entirely legal, but first, this court needs to understand what's really at stake. The judge nodded. Proceed, Your Honor. The defense moves to recall witness Robert Chen. We have reason to believe his testimony was incomplete. Not deliberately, but because the questions asked didn't allow for full context of what he observed and heard that evening. Helena objected immediately. The witness has already been examined and cross-examined by both sides. Recalling him as highly irregular. Irregular. Yes. But not unprecedented when new information suggests material testimony was omitted. Sir Geoffrey held up documents Sophie's folder. I have evidence here that shows the events of March 15th were far more complex than presented. Evidence that explains not just what happened, but why. The judge considered. These documents are they admissible? I believe they are, Your Honor. But even without them, Mr. Chen's original testimony contained gaps that should be filled. Okay. Your Honor, Helena said urgently, this is a transparent attempt to retry the case after the defense realized they're losing. We're not losing, Sir Geoffrey said quietly. We're trying to ensure that truth, complete truth, is presented before judgment is rendered. The judge looked at Camilla, at the packed courtroom, at the weight of history bearing down on this moment. Mr. Chen, are you present? Robert stood. Yes, Your Honor. Did you withhold information during your previous testimony? Robert's mouth was dry. This was it. The moment Sophie had predicted. The moment that would define everything. It's not withhold, Your Honor. But yes, there were things I heard that I didn't think were relevant. Things that seemed private? Are they relevant to this case? Robert looked at Camilla. At the woman who'd walked past him broken that night. At the Queen, who'd rather be convicted than destroy her husband's dignity? Yes, Your Honor, they're relevant. The judge nodded slowly. Then I'll allow it. Mr. Chen, please retake the stand. Robert walked forward, feeling every eye on him. This time, he would tell them everything. This time, he would give them truth. Robert sat in the witness chair for the second time. The weight felt heavier now. He wasn't just testifying about what he'd heard. He was testifying about lives, about love, about truth that could destroy or save. Sir Geoffrey approached with respect. Mr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to return. I know this isn't easy. No, sir. It's not. During your previous testimony, you described hearing an argument. Raised voices. A slapping sound. But you didn't tell us everything you heard, did you? No, I didn't. Why not? Robert chose his words carefully. Because what I heard was deeply personal, private. I didn't think it was my place to share. But now, you believe it's necessary? Yes, because without context, the truth is incomplete. Sir Geoffrey nodded. Tell us what else you heard that night. Robert took a breath. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Before the argument escalated, I heard the Queen say, "Why are you listening to them and not to me?" And His Majesty responded, "Because they understand what's at stake." She said, "What about what I have at stake? What about our marriage?" Go on. His Majesty said something about protecting his legacy, about not wanting to be remembered as the king who couldn't finish his reign. The Queen said she didn't care about legacy, that she cared about him, about them. Robert's voice grew steadier as he continued. Then I heard the Queen say, "They're turning you against me," and His Majesty said, "Oh. No one's turning me against you. I'm making my own decisions," she said. Are you? Or are you letting advisors who care more about the crown than about you make decisions for both of us? The courtroom stirred. Sir Geoffrey pressed on. What happened next? His Majesty said, "I'm dying. My mind is dying. I get to decide how I spend whatever time I have left." And the Queen said, Robert's voice caught, she said, "You're not spending it. You're running from it. And you're running from me." Camilla was crying silently. Charles, sitting in the back of the courtroom now, had his head in his hands. "Mr. Chen, is that when she struck him?" "Not yet." His Majesty said, "You'd be better off without me. Find someone else. Someone whole." "You deserve that," and the Queen shouted, "I deserve you. I chose you. And you don't get to decide I don't mean it." Robert looked directly at the judge. That's when I heard the sound. The slap. And immediately after, the Queen said, "I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. But please, please see me. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." The silence was total, complete. And His Majesty's response? He said, "Get out." But his voice wasn't angry. It was broken. Like he was breaking both their hearts to save hers. Sir Geoffrey let that settle. Mr. Chen, in your professional opinion, as someone who's observed this couple for 12 years, was the Queen being violent? Or was she being desperate? Desperate. Absolutely desperate. And His Majesty, was he a victim of assault? Or a victim of his own attempt to push away the person who loved him most? Helena objected. Calls for speculation and psychological analysis. Your Honor, Sir Geoffrey said, Mr. Chen has observed these individuals longer and more closely than perhaps anyone else. His observations are valuable. The judge allowed it. Robert spoke carefully. I think they were both victims of circumstance, of illness, of advisors who prioritized image over humanity, and of their own inability to navigate the hardest moment of their marriage. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Sir Geoffrey returned to his seat. Helena declined cross-examination. What could she say? Robert had just reframed the entire case. The judge addressed the attorneys. Are there any other witnesses or evidence? Sir Geoffrey stood. Your Honor, the defense rests. But I'd like to make a statement for the record. Proceed. This court has heard testimony about assault, about anger, about broken vows. But what we've really heard is a story about two people who love each other facing an impossible situation without the tools to handle it properly. The Queen admits her action was wrong. She's never claimed otherwise. But wrong doesn't exist in a vacuum. Context matters. Humanity matters. And reducing this moment to a simple assault charge does injustice to the complexity of human relationships under extreme duress. He paused. Your Honor, if we convict the Queen based purely on the letter of the law, send a message that emotional context, that desperation, that love itself doesn't matter. That the law is a blunt instrument that cannot bend for human reality. I urge this court to consider not just what happened, but why, and to render judgment that acknowledges both the wrong that was done and the humanity of why it happened. Helena stood for her response. Your Honor, I sympathize with the defense's position, but law without consistent application is just favoritism. If the Queen were anyone else, a shopkeeper, a teacher, a banker, we'd be having this discussion. Or would we simply convict based on admitted assault and move forward? The answer, Helena continued, must be that we'd convict, because that's justice. Equal application regardless of status, regardless of emotion, regardless of circumstance. The Queen broke the law. She admits it. Conviction is the only appropriate outcome. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll render my decision tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Court is adjourned. Everyone stood. The gavel fell. And suddenly, it was over. Except for the waiting. Outside, Robert was swarmed by reporters. He pushed through without comment. Found Sophie waiting near the street. You did it, she said. I did what? I just told the truth. Exactly. And now the judge has to decide if truth matters more than law. That night was endless. Robert couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Just waited. The next morning, the courtroom was even more packed. Security had tripled. The King and Queen were both present, sitting on opposite sides of the aisle like a wedding gone wrong. At exactly 10 a.m., the judge entered. Everyone stood. Please be seated. I'll read my decision. The room held its collective breath. This case has been among the most difficult I've presided over. Not because the law is unclear, it isn't. Assault is assault. But because the circumstances surrounding that assault are extraordinary. The judge looked at Camilla. Your Majesty, you admit to striking His Majesty? That is, legally speaking, assault. The question before me is whether that legal reality requires conviction or whether mitigating circumstances alter the appropriate response. She continued, I've listened to testimony about desperation, about love, about a marriage facing an impossible challenge, about advisors prioritizing image over humanity, about a husband trying to protect his wife by pushing her away, and about a wife fighting to remain present despite being actively excluded. The judge paused. In my 30 years on the bench, I've learned that law serves justice, not the other way around. When law becomes so rigid it cannot bend for human reality, it ceases to be just. Helena's face fell. She knew what was coming. Therefore, while I find that an assault technically occurred, I also find that the circumstances were so extraordinary, so rooted in love and desperation rather than malice or danger, that conviction would serve no purpose except punishment without justice. Gasps filled the courtroom. Charges are dismissed. Your Majesty, you're free to go. The gavel fell. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. People argued and celebrated in equal measure. But Robert only watched Camilla and Charles. They stood simultaneously, looked at each other across the aisle, and slowly, carefully, Charles walked toward his wife. She met him halfway. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Just held each other while the world shouted around them. Two people who'd almost lost everything, finding each other again in the wreckage. Later, outside the courthouse, Robert found Sophie. You were right, he said. Truth mattered. This time. Maybe not next time, she smiled. But today, it was enough. Robert watched the King and Queen leave together, hands intertwined, facing the future, whatever it held as partners. What happens now? He asked. Now? They live. They love. They face his illness together. And maybe, just maybe, they remember that marriage isn't about perfect responses. It's It's about staying when everything screams to run. Robert thought about that. About duty and love? About standing guard and standing by someone? About the difference between protecting someone and protecting them from themselves? Think they'll make it? He asked. Sophie watched the royal couple disappear into their car. I think they already have. Everything else is just time. The crowd dispersed. The reporters left. The story, for now, ended, but in a palace across London. Two people who'd almost destroyed each other were learning to rebuild. Learning that love meant fighting for each other, not just with each other. Learning that facing the end together was braver than facing it alone. And Robert Chen, who'd spent 12 years guarding a door, had finally learned what was worth protecting. Not crowns. Not institutions. Not pride or legacy, just love. Imperfect, desperate, human love. The kind worth fighting for. Even when fighting looked like a slap across the face. Even when love meant breaking before it could heal. The verdict was in. Not just from the judge, but from life itself. And the verdict was simple. Love wins. Messy, complicated, flawed. But love wins.